Do you know what really sucks? Is sitting down to edit your project and realizing that you have gaps in your coverage or shots missing. You need to have a really good, specific, and detailed shot list. Head over to filmmakersecrets.com/shot list, SHOTLIST, to get a killer shot list template along with some training where I show you step by step exactly how to use it.
It's hard to care about somebody when you have no connection to them. They're not a real person. But through filmmaking, we can make those connections. People can connect and change the world.
Filmmakers have the power to evoke emotion, inspire thought, and drive universal change in this world. So how does a filmmaker thrive in an environment that is almost intentionally designed to bring you down? That is the question, and this podcast reveals the answer. What's happening, filmmakers? It's George VK. Welcome to Filmmaker Secrets podcast, episode number 17. We are on our way to 20, and I am extremely elated to introduce my next guest, Maureen Maloney, who's an award-winning filmmaker and documentarian. She's just an amazing filmmaker. I've been catching up with some of her work. So Maureen, go ahead and say what's up to our filmmakers and reveal the one filmmaker secret that you've been keeping from us.
Hi, thank you for having me. Okay, so this has really been on my mind lately. It's on my mind a lot, but that is framing. And as filmmakers, of course, we think literally about framing, and we know the importance of how we frame things in our films. As documentary filmmakers, we have an extra level of framing because when we're out filming the real world, we can tell 100 different stories based on the same event just by how we frame things, right? So we have to be really cognizant. But in our personal lives, in our own minds, we have to be careful with how we frame things because the way we approach our filmmaking, our everything in our life depends on how we frame what's happening. And with filmmaking especially, you know, there's a lot of challenges that you're going to face. And depending on how you frame those challenges in your mind, you're going to have an easier time or a harder time handling those challenges. So for instance, with me, with the film that I'm working on now, I started working on this 2 years ago. I'm coming up on, you know, I'm applying for grants. Some of these grants I've applied to 3 or 4 times already. And the thing is, that can be really frustrating, or I can look back and see how much I've improved over that time because I've had to take the time to learn my subject better, to connect to people more. And I'm so thankful for that. I look at, I just did a complete overhaul of my grant, like a complete overhaul of my proposal. And this is probably the 3rd time that I've done that. In between I'll do tweaky stuff, but at some point you look and you're like, I'm so far beyond this now. It's got to go. And I can look at that and be like, oh, there's so many barriers to filmmaking. Or I can look at it as, there are these challenges that make me not only a better filmmaker every time I make it through one, but they make me a better person. Like I'm becoming a more resilient, gritty person thanks to all of the things that I've had to go through. So that's my secret.
That grit is so important. Yeah. And I love that secret. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm glad you launched into grants because I want to congratulate you on receiving the first female filmmaker grant from the Colorado Association for Video and Film, CFVA. Yeah, that's amazing. Can you talk us through the process you went through and kind of what that feeling was when you actually received the approval?
Oh my gosh, it's the best feeling. It is such a good feeling because it's validation. I mean, you know, you as a filmmaker, you learn self-validation. You learn to keep yourself going. And there's, you know, people in my life who who give me a lot of positive feedback on the film. But to have an organization like the Colorado Film and Video Association and Women in Film and Media Colorado to choose my film, out of who knows how many applicants, that was a really great feeling. This grant was a pretty easy application compared to a lot of the grants out there. And I think it is important to note that, it's a local grant, and a lot of people recommend kind of starting at that local level, because those are going to be the people who know you, the people who can vouch for you. When you get up to those higher levels, they, chicken and egg and things like that, they want to see that somebody believes in you. They want to see that. And the people in your community are going to be the ones who do that. So I'm so thankful for them and that grant. It's huge.
That's awesome. When I spoke with Rob Shearer about this, he brought up the example from Tim Ferriss's book about how he instructed his students to go out and try to reach a seemingly unreachable person. And the person that was going to get closest to, their target he was going to buy them some sort of trip, to go to some exotic location. And then when the students came back, it turned out that nobody even made an effort to try to reach that unreachable person. But he told them, if you had even gotten through to the secretary or to the assistant of that person, you would have won this trip. But nobody even made the effort because they assumed they weren't going to get anywhere with it. So, and everybody thought that way. So nobody got the trip. Can you talk to us a bit? What makes you so adamant and so, you use the word grit, which I love. What makes you so gritty about, putting in the hustle, putting in the grind to actually get results?
I think grittiness is one of those things that you have to practice. I did read Angela Duckworth's great book, Grit. And, she kind of talks about this. There are some people who've been through enough situations to have that intrinsic grittiness in them. But for the rest of us, it's scary, calling somebody who seems unapproachable. That seems scary. So you have to take the little steps, and they're little steps. You have to commit to one little thing every day that you can do and just push yourself. And over time, it does become a little bit easier as you learn more, as you become more comfortable with your topic, your film, you then become more confident. And that confidence is going to allow you to talk to more people. And as you talk to more people, then you're going to become more confident. Then it's going to become easier. And it's just it's a feedback loop, a positive feedback loop that keeps going and going and going. So at first, and I like to talk about climbing 14ers, right? If you are at the base of a 14er and you're constantly looking up at that peak, it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be daunting. It never looks like the peak is getting closer. You just look at the next step and the next step and the next. Everybody can keep taking one more step. And eventually you just get there. But if you are constantly looking at that peak, you're going to become overwhelmed, and you may lose your ambition. You might lose your guts to go for it.
That's awesome. I read that you made it to the base camp of Everest, which I want to get to in a little bit, but I wanted to relate to that. My first 14er was Mount Princeton, which is not an easy climb. And I was probably around 14, 15 years old. And I did it with my brother and a couple of his friends. And the one thing that he told me, because I kept wanting to stop and take pictures, right? He told me, the view's going to be gorgeous at the top. I promise you, just keep going. And it was so difficult for me. I'm running out of breath. I'm like struggling. I'm about to give up. And he told me, just focus on keeping a tempo, one step, one foot after the other. It's not a race. You just have to put one foot in front of the other. And that's what's going to get you to the finish line. And I think us as filmmakers, we can really relate that to our craft, whatever it is you're doing, commercial, narrative, documentary, broadcast, event space, all of those, I think, can really benefit from this concept of putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah,
I love that.
I do like your method, though, of enjoying the journey, because that kind of goes back to framing, right? If every step of the way, if every challenge you can frame as something enjoyable, like feeling yourself becoming a better person, feeling your filmmaking ability grow, then that's going to make the process less drudgery.
Definitely. Yeah, I like that word. Okay, so Maureen, take me back, way back to the moment that you got this spark, this inspiration that, yes, I want to become a filmmaker. I want to tell stories that are meaningful and compelling. Take me back to that one moment. Describe what was happening around you, what you were feeling, what you were watching, perhaps. What was that one moment?
Yeah, I used to be a biologist, and I was studying endocrine disruption, which is hormones in the environment that chemicals in the environment that screw with our hormones. It's a pretty depressing topic. And at the time, it was bothering me that nobody really knew or understand anything about it, because I felt like it was really important. And it is. And some of the people in my field were like, we need more science communicators, people to get the message out. And I thought, okay, maybe I could do something like that. And then I met a documentary filmmaker, like a real life documentary filmmaker. It seemed like such a big deal at the time, because I didn't know any filmmakers. And I grew up in a small town. I'm a farm girl, like, ultimately. And so I don't know, it seemed like one of those unachievable things, but I was like, wow, maybe I could do this. And I took a little 4-day filmmaker boot camp, and I loved it. And I kind of never really looked back. I mean, I continued working as a biologist for a while. I joined the Peace Corps, and then things really turned there, because before I had been so focused on biology and data, and that stuff is important. But it occurred to me in Madagascar that the reason why it's important is because of people. People are being impacted by things that, a lot of times, things that we're doing that they had nothing to do with and they don't really understand. And it occurred to me too that, like, these people that are being impacted, they're ultimately the same as us. And that's when it really hit me how important connection is. And that it's hard to care about somebody in Madagascar when you have no connection to them. They're not a real person. But through filmmaking, we can make those connections. You can show someone's life and show that they're a person just like you and how they're being impacted. And I think through that, people can connect and change the world.
That's amazing. And that kind of brings me to the perfect segue into something I read in your bio that we talked about just prior to starting the record, which is a little quote here. I believe connection is the most transformative force on the planet. Can you give us kind of the log line for that philosophy that you have?
I don't know. It's everything to me. It's, when you know someone personally, and even if it is through a film, you care about that. I think that's our human nature is to feel empathy, to feel caring towards that person. A lot of what we're dealing with in the world today is the lack of connection. As a result of that is people not understanding each other. And, for instance, with climate change, we have to change our behaviors in order to fix this. But we're having a problem not because we lack solutions or information, but because we lack motivation to make the changes that we need. Mm-hmm. And for me, building those connections between people and helping people understand what's really going on, that's going to provide the motivation.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to get to your documentary film, but just before that, I'd love to hear about, as you're growing up as a filmmaker, just at the very beginning, and you're geeking out on all the stuff, how a camera works, how framing is done. You're diving deep into the education part of it. What were some of the roadblocks that you had, that you were met with as you're going on this journey as a growing filmmaker, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, what the biggest thing was just not understanding at all the structure of the film industry or how you make a film, which admittedly I'm still figuring out. And yeah, I mean, I guess it was all just sort of like a mystery to me. And I didn't know anyone in the film industry. And that was a big barrier too. It's like, how do I find stuff? I was watching YouTube videos and I was able to learn editing techniques and camera techniques and things like that. But it really was those connections. It all goes back to connections that I was lacking, that I was able to find, fortunately, finally here in Denver, especially with the beginning of Women in Film and Media Colorado. And that organization really plugged me into the film community and to mentors that helped me learn what I needed to do.
Awesome. So as you are kind of coming into your own as a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker per se, like I have a lot of respect for documentary filmmakers. This is something that Rob Shearer and I talked about as well. How did the idea for Vanilla Farmers come about?
Well, after my Peace Corps service, I knew that I wanted to make a film about Madagascar, about the people there, because I came back and so few people really knew anything about Madagascar. They just thought of the Disney film whenever I mentioned it. And so I wanted to show people that, because I think the Malagasy people are the coolest. But I also wanted to show how they were being affected daily by climate change, because it is just like an everyday reality. It's not, for a lot of people here in the States, it's like this future issue or it's a pretend imaginary issue. And these people have been dealing with it for a long time. But that wasn't a story. It took me a while to really figure out what the story was. But one of my friends started working in a vanilla industry for a fair trade company. And vanilla was getting mentioned in the news fairly often because it became so expensive. All of a sudden, the price spiked. So I started looking into it and I thought, oh, yeah, this is a pretty good climate story because these farmers really are impacted by climate change. A lot of the issues that they're facing are from these massive cyclones coming through and destroying their crops. But as I started digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this topic, I started realizing that really it's a connection point for a lot of different issues, for gender issues, for fair trade and farming issues, and so it just became more and more compelling as I worked with this story, and I just got totally drawn into it.
I love hearing about your process, especially when we think about the difference of narrative film versus a documentary. With the narrative film, you're pulling pieces and elements perhaps from personal experience. You're coming up with a story from scratch. Whereas with the documentary film, like you said, that wasn't the story, but then you found it. It's like about discovering that story. There's events that are happening. There are certain situations in the world, and you're like, okay, well, this is a situation. How do I dig deep and find the actual story within that? What was your pre-production process like in terms of getting ready to leave for Madagascar and to shoot this documentary? What were some of the actual practical things that you did in pre-production in order to get ready?
Yeah, well, one thing that I did was I talked to a lot of other Peace Corps volunteers, because when I lived in Madagascar, I actually did not live in the vanilla region. I lived on the opposite coast. The vanilla region is the northeast coast, and I lived on the southwest coast. So I used my network of people and started talking to Peace Corps volunteers who had lived there. And that's how I got connected with my assistant producer, Samson Kayed, who has been just incredibly valuable because he was the head of the English club in that region. So he did a lot of outreach. And so he just has connections with everybody. He's like a local celebrity there in that part of the country. So he connected me to the farmers, to a lot of middlemen, just a lot of people in the vanilla industry. So that was the biggest thing leading up to it, was just talking to lots of people and preparing logistics as much as possible. There's a limited amount that you can do with that as far as preparation goes for Madagascar, because it is, especially that area, doesn't have a lot of electricity or internet connection. So it was also a lot of flying by the seat of my pants, admittedly. Yeah.
Well, it's all about being vulnerable. And I think it takes a lot of courage to even admit that. So thank you. Can you talk about the title, Voice of Vanilla? I'm sure it has a lot of meaning, but I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well, for me, I really think about wanting to give a voice to the vanilla farmers, especially to the women, because I was watching a lot of the news stories about vanilla, and rarely do they talk to a farmer. If they did, it was usually, somebody would talk and then they'd kind of, translate, oh, this person said this. And I wanted to give the farmers, especially the women, their own opportunity to talk. I wanted them to be full life people on the screen, not just like somebody in the background. So that was like really the thinking behind the voice. And then of course it's like an alliteration. So, I can't pass up a good alliteration,
I love it. So obviously, it's probably not the most convenient of situations in terms of being able to even just charge your camera if there's no electricity. Can you talk through were there any anecdotes that happened during the shoot? I mean, we're just watching through the trailer, even I can see that it's very remote. It's very much raw. Mm-hmm. What was that like?
Yeah, well, there's one video that I have on our YouTube channel of us crossing a river in a really narrow, just a dugout canoe. Uh-huh. And I have all of my gear in a backpack that I'm wearing on my back. And I am just like freaking out because, and this was, I don't know, maybe 5 days into the trip. So, if I lose my gear, I'm just stuck here in Madagascar for another couple of weeks with no gear, no purpose for being there. So that was probably my biggest anecdote because, we had gone out, we were kind of stationed in the city of Sambavo. So we had an old Peace Corps volunteers house that we were staying in actually there. And then going out to this village that was a few hours from Sambava. And then from just staying in somebody's, grass hut, really, in this village, going out to this plot, which took a couple of hours to get to, this vanilla plot. So I wasn't going to leave any gear behind. So I had it all with me. And it was this river crossing. And then it was just 2 hours uphill with all my gear on my back too. And then coming down, it was raining and it's all clay there. So it's like very slippery when it's raining and wet. But yeah, so there's a lot like that.
Talk about an adventure.
Yeah.
I love it. Can you give this, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Maureen. I hope you don't mind. Can you give us a storytelling secret for our filmmakers? Because I think a lot of times filmmakers will focus on the situation or the sort of events that are happening in their film, whether it be narrative or documentary, that the idea of developing their character, even if, you know, it's part of the interview of whoever the subject is for your documentary. Do you have any kind of storytelling secrets for our filmmakers that can help them out to flush out their stories to be more dynamic, more compelling?
Yeah, you know, I think when it comes to that, you go into making a film with an idea, and I do think that's important to have a clear idea. But once you get into a situation with someone, or any situation, I think if you're out, you know, filming, if you're in production, everything in front of you should be a potential part of your film. And I would say, look at everything like it's a scene, like it's its very own scene. And how does that scene start? How do you enter the scene? How does it unfold? And then how does it end? How would you close that scene and move on to the next scene? And for those people who are maybe, you know, really, really just starting out and haven't studied filmmaking, you know, in any formal way, this is a really good thing to think about when you're watching films, especially like your favorite films. Okay, notice when a scene starts and how the scene changes to a different scene and how they open and close the scene and all of that stuff. And then really when you're there and you're filming somebody, think in that way.
Oh, that's so good. I talk about this concept that I'm sort of came up with called story hacking. And that gives me so many ideas because the way you enter a scene and exit a scene matters so much. You know, a lot of times I think people will try to do a lot of exposition or a lot of closing up the scene, but perhaps it benefits more to enter the scene late where action is already happening and then get out of there as soon as you can. That's a great storytelling secret. Thank you for that. How are you sort of adapting your film? Because it's not finished yet, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what's happening right now?
So I actually, fortunately, during the COVID pandemic, I was able to connect with a really amazing journalist named Gail Borgia, who is Malagasy, and she lives in Madagascar. And she is able to continue filming even without me. She's got a great team there in Madagascar. I mean, I'm hoping to be able to get back there as soon as possible, but this year is going to be a pretty critical year for the farmers because vanilla prices dropped this year drastically. And which really kind of doesn't make any sense because the demand for vanilla last year shot up because everybody was home making comfort food. We shot up 500%. So that's something we're definitely going to try to examine and you know why 8th grade economics tells me that when demand goes up, so should the price, but that's not what's happening. But the government of Madagascar is trying to combat that by having their own price floor, but that might mean nobody goes to Madagascar to buy their stuff, which means the farmers get screwed over. So we definitely want to capture that. Madagascar depends a lot on imports from other countries, which they're not getting that now either. So, you know, there's definitely a lot going on there. And fortunately, you know, I've got this team there in Madagascar who's able to capture that.
It's interesting.
And I'm just here in Denver.
Yeah. Stuck. Well, what are you going to do?
Stuck here in Denver.
It's pretty beautiful here too.
It's not Colorado.
It's interesting how the story pivots, you know, before you abandon the film, because they say the film is never finished. It's just abandoned. The story is shifting with the current events. And I think that's really interesting how you can adapt and you can continue having this progress happening with a film, even though you're not actually physically involved in that progress. So I'm happy that at least that you can have some sort of momentum with it that you can catch, and hopefully soon enough you'll be able to get, you know, the finished product that you're looking for that will serve the purpose that you're looking for. So I wish you the best of luck in that.
Thank you.
I would love to hear about your other project, Girl Aspiring, the web series. I'm really curious and intrigued. What's that about?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a career exploration. You know, like I mentioned, I grew up on a farm in a really small town. I wasn't exposed to a lot of careers, and I've been kind of that person that's tried everything as much as I possibly can in my life. I mean, I've been a pastry chef. I've worked in river restoration. I've been a ski patroller. Like I've been a tall ship sailor. I just like trying different things. And I always want to know about how you do different things. And so this was kind of my opportunity to explore this for myself, but also I can film it and I can share it for other people too. Yeah. How do you become a tattoo artist? And what does that look like to be a tattoo artist? How do you become an elephant keeper? How do you become a restaurant owner? So those are some of the things that I've explored so far. And yeah, I definitely hope to get back to that one day and keep doing that because it's fun.
Those little vignettes, I've enjoyed watching through them on your channel. I love hearing other people's stories, and I think that's what really brings the connection between a lot of people. I talk about the idea of continuing to tell stories, even if they're the same stories. You know, on the last episode, I talked about the stories my grandpa would always tell us when we were kids, and we would get frustrated because we were like, I've heard this story before, Grandpa, but I didn't realize it at the time. And he was really sort of, implementing that idea of connection. He was connecting with his grandchildren, even though the stories he was telling were the same. They were slight variations, and there was some exaggeration at times. So that's kind of my point in saying that I enjoyed watching through those little vignettes, because it's other people's stories, and perhaps they're not unique or original, but there is value in telling other people's stories that really intrigue or have some sort of impact on at least that one person. And I think, just in that, you've succeeded. Okay, I can keep talking to you for a while, but I'm trying to keep these a little bit short. Where can our filmmakers go to find out more about you, Maureen?
Yeah, well, they can find out about the film at voiceofvanilla.com. Voice of Vanilla. I've been told that I don't enunciate that well enough. And then you can find more of my work at my own personal website, which is maureenmaloney.com.
Beautiful. I'll have all the links in the show notes in the description. So be sure to check out all of Maureen's work. Give her a subscribe. You have a podcast as well called My Doc Journey that I've listened to, and I've really enjoyed, because you give valuable information. It's almost like every episode is a course. So for all those filmmakers that are interested in documentary filmmaking, or even little tidbits like we talked about at the beginning with signing up for grants, she's got a ton of tips. And the episodes are fun to listen to. You're very easygoing. So I definitely recommend that. mydocjourney.com, correct?
Yep.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes as well.
It's all the lessons I'm learning.
And I love that you're just documenting your process and being vulnerable. I think that's the perfect way to do it. And it's the filmmaker way. Okay, last question for you, Maureen. If you were on a desert island, stuck with only one movie to watch for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, man. Part of me feels like I'm supposed to pick a documentary for this, but it's not going to be. My desert island movie would be I Heart Huckabees.
Awesome. Perfect. Beautiful. All right, Maureen, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, your golden nuggets, and your secrets. I really appreciate you coming on Filmmaker Secrets podcast.
My pleasure.
If you like that, then you are going to love my Cine Racing Challenge. This is a 7-day filmmaking competition where your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to write, shoot, and edit a short 60-second film in just 7 days for your one chance to win with over $10,000 in prizes. So head over to cineracing.com. That's cineracing.com to get registered. Spots are filling up fast and the timer is ticking before the next Cine Racing Challenge launches. So be sure to head over to cineracing.com right now to get registered. I'll see you over there.